I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself a serious question. Have you noticed that life lately just doesn't feel normal? Things are moving faster. What used to work no longer works. Doors are closing that we didn't expect. People are changing. Systems are shaking. And some of us are trying to fix the symptoms, when what's really happening is far deeper. This isn't random. This isn't chaos. This is a shift, a divine shift. Now, I'm a firm believer that God doesn't change things just to make us uncomfortable. He changes things to make us ready. Ready for elevation. Ready for calling. Ready for purpose. And I'm telling you right now, if you've been feeling pressure, disruption, or transition, it's not rejection, it's redirection. So before you tune me out, lean in. Because what I'm about to share with you might just explain what's been happening in your life. And when you understand God's shift, you won't just survive it, you'll step into it with power. Now, if we're going to talk about God's shift, the first thing we've got to do is recognize when one is happening. Because God doesn't always send a memo before He moves. He doesn't always knock politely and schedule an appointment. Sometimes God will rearrange your life without asking for your permission. He'll disturb your comfort to deliver your calling. And if you don't have spiritual awareness, you'll misinterpret divine movement as random chaos. See, many people are living confused right now because they're trying to diagnose a spiritual shift with human logic. They're trying to fix supernatural realignment with natural responses. You can't medicate what's spiritual. You can't counsel what's divine. You've got to discern it, because what looks like instability may actually be God rearranging the pieces of your destiny. What feels like loss may actually be preparation. What feels like delay may actually be positioning. You know you're in a divine shift when things you used to depend on stop working. The same strategies that brought you success suddenly fall flat. The people who cheered for you before now fall silent. The routines that once energized you now drain you. That's not coincidence, that's heaven saying, you can't stay here. God will let the nest get uncomfortable so you'll stop clinging to where you've been and start moving toward where He's taking you. Sometimes He'll allow frustration, not because something is wrong, but because something is over. And when something is over in God's eyes, no amount of effort can resurrect it. That's why some of you feel stuck, because you're trying to bring life back to what God already pronounced finished. You're praying for revival when God is trying to give you departure. You're trying to restore a chapter God already closed so He can write a new one. Pay attention to divine discontent. That's often the first sign of a shift. Not all discomfort is punishment. Sometimes it's promotion in disguise. Just ask a baby eagle when an eagle is fully grown. The mother will begin removing the soft padding from the nest, pulling out the feathers and fur until nothing is left but sharp sticks and prickly bones. Now to the young eagle, it feels like betrayal. Why would Mama remove my comfort? But she's not being cruel. She's issuing a divine eviction notice. She knows the eagle was born for the sky, not the nest. And as long as it's comfortable, it will never spread its wings. Some of you are living in a pokey nest right now. Life has gotten irritating. The comfort has been stripped. The familiar has become agitating. That's not the devil. That's destiny saying, it's time to fly. Another sign of God's shift is sudden separation. People you thought would walk with you forever suddenly fade into the background. Relationships that were once tight start loosening without explanation. Don't panic. Don't grieve longer than necessary. When God is shifting you, He will not allow everyone to shift with you. Not because they're bad people, but because they're not assigned to your next level. Some people were only meant for your development, not your destination. You honor their contribution, but you don't chase their departure. If they walked away, it's because they reached their limit. Let go gracefully. See, if Abraham had stayed in his hometown because he didn't want to offend neighbors, he would have missed his nation. If Joseph had clung to resentment in the pit, he would have forfeited the palace. If Moses had refused to leave Pharaoh's house, he never would have encountered God's presence. A shift rarely looks like a blessing at first. It often looks like heartbreak, disruption, or inconvenience. But when heaven is involved, chaos is part of construction. You've also got to recognize timing. God shifts seasons, and if you try to behave like it's summer when it's already fall, you'll be unprepared, unprotected, and unproductive. Some of you are trying to reap in a season where you were called to sow. Others are still waiting when God already said move. Some are still asking questions when God already made statements. You can't afford to be casual about timing when heaven is on the move. God will repeat a message to you through different channels until you listen. You'll hear the same scripture, the same phrase, the same conviction in your spirit over and over. A friend will say it, a sermon will echo it, a song will confirm it. That's not coincidence, that's coordination. That's your soul's alarm clock going off saying, pay attention, God is speaking. But if you keep hitting snooze on divine instruction, don't be surprised when doors close. A shift requires spiritual sensitivity. That means instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, Lord, what are you doing through this? Instead of saying, what did I lose? Ask, what are you making room for? Perspective is everything. God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't allow disruption without direction. The problem is we often fight the shift instead of flowing with it. We cling to the familiar rather than trusting the Father. But you cannot pray for transformation and then resist transition. You can't ask for elevation and then refuse movement. Let me tell you something. When God is shifting you, He will start coordinating divine interruptions. Your plans will fall through so His plan can break through. You'll apply for one thing and get turned down only to be redirected to something greater. You'll get delayed in traffic only to avoid danger. You'll lose a job only to discover a purpose. That's why trust is essential. If you only trust God when things are logical, you'll miss Him when things are supernatural. Let me make it plain. If the earth can shift on its axis without warning to produce an earthquake, how much more can God shift your life without notice to produce destiny? Truth is, divine movement rarely comes with explanation. God says, go, and He expects you to go before you see. He says, leave, and He expects you to leave before you know where. He says, trust, and He expects you to trust before you understand. And let me warn you, delays during a shift are not denials. Just because God hasn't revealed the full picture doesn't mean He isn't painting it. The brushstrokes of heaven are sometimes slow, but they are always precise. So while you wait, don't complain, prepare. Don't question, listen. Don't freeze, stay flexible, because when God is ready to accelerate, everything can change in a moment. So here's the real question: are you paying attention? Are you spiritually awake? Can you recognize when God is shifting things around you? Because if you can't recognize it, you won't be ready to respond to it. Everything may be shaking, but the shaking is not to destroy you. It's to position you. The nest is uncomfortable because the sky is calling. And when God calls you higher, you don't argue. You spread your wings and go. Now that we've learned how to recognize when God is shifting, we've got to talk about something most people don't like: release. Because before God brings increase, He almost always requires release. You cannot receive what's in His hands if you refuse to let go of what's in yours. And this is where many people get stuck. They want new blessings while clinging to old burdens. They want fresh miracles while holding on to expired mindsets. They want God to elevate them without surrendering what's weighing them down. But that's not how divine transition works. God will not pour new wine into old wineskins. Sometimes God will take something out of your life not because He's punishing you, but because He's preparing you. He'll remove what you thought you needed, so you'll finally discover who you truly need. He'll strip away false securities, so you'll rely on His sufficiency. He'll let Isaac get tied on the altar to prove if your love for him is greater than your love for the promise. Because he wants to know, do you love the gift more than the giver? Do you trust the miracle more than the miracle worker? Or can you release it back to him and still say, though he slay me, yet will I trust him? Let's be honest, release rarely feels spiritual. It feels like heartbreak. It feels like confusion. It feels like betrayal. It feels like standing in an empty room where something used to be. But just because something is gone doesn't mean God is done. In fact, the removal is often the beginning of the revealing. He removes what's temporary so he can reveal what's eternal. He shuts doors you were willing to settle for so he can open the one you were born for. And hear me, God doesn't always wait for you to release things voluntarily. Sometimes he'll snatch it out of your hands for your own protection. He'll let the relationship fall apart because he knew if it lasted any longer, you would have compromised your identity. He'll let the job dry up because if you stayed too comfortable, you never would have pursued your calling. He'll let the plan fail so you'll finally start seeking his plan. You call it loss, heaven calls it rescue. This is why you can't measure God's goodness by how much you're holding. Sometimes his goodness is proven by what he took away. Because if he hadn't taken it, it would have taken you. If he hadn't ended it, you never would have begun. If he hadn't removed them, you never would have discovered you could survive without them. See, some of the things you cried over were actually answered prayers in disguise. You asked God to grow you, but growth requires separation. You asked God to use you, but use requires pruning. You asked God to bless you, but blessing requires obedience. You can't have one without the other. Let me illustrate. A farmer cannot expect a harvest if he refuses to release seed. It doesn't matter how powerful the seed is. It only reaches its potential once it's buried. As long as it stays in his pocket, it's safe but useless. Some of you are holding blessings that were never meant to be held. They were meant to be sound. You're clinging to comfort when God is calling you to sacrifice. You're protecting what God is trying to plant. And the longer you hold on to it, the longer you delay your harvest. Release is not loss. It's investment. It's trading what you have for what's greater. It's surrendering temporary control to receive eternal reward. But you've got to trust that God's return policy is always greater than your release price. He never asks for something without planning to multiply it. When Abraham lifted the knife, God provided the ram. When Moses released the rod, God split the sea. When the widow released her last bit of oil, God filled every jar. When the disciples released 2 fish and 5 loaves, God fed thousands. And when Jesus released his life, God raised him up and gave him a name above every name. The problem is, many people want resurrection without crucifixion. They want breakthrough without burial. But hear me, until something dies, nothing lives. Until you let go of what was, you cannot step into what will be. That's why God will let certain doors close so forcefully that you can't reopen them. Because he knows if you could, you would. You'd walk right back into the place he delivered you from. So he locks it. He seals it. He makes sure that even if you pound on it in weakness, it won't open. Not because he's trapping you. He's protecting your future. And let's address something. Release is not just external. It's internal. Because for some of you, it's not people you need to release, it's pain. It's the anger you've nursed like a pet. It's the guilt that keeps rehearsing your past failures. It's the shame that whispers you're not worthy. God can shift your environment, but if you don't release bitterness, you'll carry bondage into your breakthrough. You cannot enter a promised land with an Egypt mentality. Freedom requires release. Healing requires release. Peace requires release. So how do you release? You release by trusting. You release by declaring, God, if you took it, I don't need it. If it left, it wasn't meant to stay. If it broke, it wasn't meant to build me. I will not beg for what you've already buried. And then you lift your hands, not to grab, but to surrender, because open hands are the posture of increase. The moment you release is the moment heaven starts rearranging. Things begin to accelerate. Opportunities begin to find you. Favor begins to chase you, not because you forced it, but because you finally made room for it. God cannot fill full hands. But the moment you let go, you qualify for overflow. So don't fear release. Fear missing what God wanted to replace it with. Because what's coming is greater than what was. If God is shifting and we've learned to recognize it, and if we've surrendered to release so He can prepare us, then the next step is crucial. We've got to realign ourselves with purpose. Because a shift without alignment is chaos, but a shift with alignment becomes calling. God doesn't just want to move things around you, He wants to move things within you. It's not enough for your situation to change. Your spirit has to change too. You can't step into a new season with the same mindset that failed you in the last one. That's why divine shifts aren't just relocations. They're recalibrations. God is not simply changing your environment. He's updating your assignment. He's repositioning your priorities. He's editing your habits, rewriting your language, confronting your patterns. Because purpose is not just what you do, it's how you think. And until your thoughts align with His truth, you'll keep defaulting back to survival when He's calling you to significance. See, when God shifts, He doesn't ask you for adjustments, He demands transformation. Adjustments are small tweaks, transformation is total surrender. Adjustments say, I'll fit God in. Transformation says, God, take over. Adjustments keep your comfort, transformation births your calling. And many people miss their shift because they want progress without process. They want destiny without discipline. They want divine power while living with divided loyalty. But if you're going to realign with purpose, you have to decide, who are you listening to? Because purpose responds to the voice of God, not the opinions of people. Some of you cannot hear destiny because you are too tuned into distraction. You've got too many voices speaking into your life, and none of them sound like heaven. Realignment sometimes requires you to turn down the volume on culture so you can turn up the clarity of Christ. You cannot take divine instruction if you're constantly scrolling through human influence. And while we're at it, let's talk about relational alignment. When God shifts you, He will often shift your circle. Not everyone you love has the capacity to walk with you into your calling. Some people love your comfort more than your calling. They'll cheer for your normal, but grow quiet when you go after your destiny. You've got to discern who's covenant and who's casual. Covenant people push you toward purpose, even when it's uncomfortable. Casual people pull you toward comfort, even when it's destructive. If you're surrounded by people who only feed your weakness, but never challenge your growth, you are misaligned. Purpose may require you to walk alone for a season. Don't be afraid of isolation. Sometimes that's where revelation matures. God will pull you away to refine you. He'll strip distractions so He can sharpen discernment. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Because when He brings you back into the room, you won't be the same. You'll walk with different authority. You'll speak with different conviction. You'll move with different confidence. Realignment also requires obedience. Obedience is not always convenient, but it is always catalytic. When God gives instruction, He's not making suggestions. He's issuing strategy, and delayed obedience is still disobedience. Some of you are praying for clarity while ignoring the last command God gave you. You don't need more confirmation. You need more compliance. Stop asking for a new word when you haven't moved on the previous one. Let's get even more real. You cannot realign with purpose while clinging to old excuses. I'm not ready. I'm not worthy. I don't know enough. I've failed too much. That is not humility. That is bondage pretending to be honesty. God already factored in your flaws when He called you. He doesn't choose you because you're qualified. He qualifies you because you're chosen. When He aligns you, He equips you. When He appoints you, He anoints you. So stop disqualifying yourself from what heaven already approved. Realignment means waking up every day and declaring, my life is not my own. My time is not random. My breath is not wasted. I was born with assignment, and I refuse to live aimlessly. Purpose does not happen by accident. It happens by alignment. When your thoughts align with His truth, when your habits align with His instruction, when your relationships align with His intention, suddenly the shift becomes clear. Suddenly what was foggy becomes focused. But alignment is not a one-time decision, it's a daily discipline. You don't realign once, you realign constantly, because life will always pull you toward distraction. Fear will always try to seduce you back into hiding. Pain will always tempt you to retreat. That's why you've got to keep adjusting your heart like a compass that keeps pointing north. God is your true north. And whenever you feel lost, check your alignment. Let me tell you something. When you realign with purpose, things that once drained you will no longer distract you. Drama won't derail you. Temptation won't trap you. Approval won't control you. Because purpose is a filter. When you know who you are and why you exist, you stop wasting energy on things beneath your assignment. Realignment also requires humility. Because sometimes God will realign you by correcting you. He'll show you areas where you've drifted. He'll confront attitudes you've justified for too long. He'll call out pride disguised as independence, jealousy disguised as ambition, apathy disguised as rest. Don't run from correction. Embrace it. Correction is not condemnation, it's calibration. God doesn't correct you to crush you. He corrects you to position you. And here's the beauty. When you truly realign, peace follows. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is ordered. You stop striving and start flowing. You stop forcing and start trusting. You stop being reactive and start becoming intentional. You walk with focus, speak with authority, move with clarity. Purpose becomes less of a mystery and more of a mandate. So if God is shifting, and you've let go of what was, then don't just stand there in the hallway between old and new. Align your mind, your mouth, your movement with where He's taking you. Because alignment is the bridge between release and increase. Once you've recognized the shift, released what no longer belongs, and realigned yourself with God's purpose, there comes a moment where you can't just nod your head and agree spiritually. You've got to move. Because a shift is not complete until there is motion. God didn't bring you this far just so you could stand at the threshold and admire the door. At some point, you've got to walk through it. Faith isn't proven by what you feel. It's proven by what you do. There are too many believers waiting for perfect clarity before they take the first step. But God rarely gives full blueprints. He gives next steps. He told Abraham, "Go to a land I will show you." Not have shown you, not fully mapped out for you, will show you. Which means revelation is often progressive. Direction is often discovered in motion. Some things you will never understand until you obey. Some doors won't open until your foot hits the ground. Some favor won't activate until you move in the direction of your calling. We love to pray, "Lord, order my steps," but you can't order steps that aren't being taken. Heaven is not obligated to accelerate stagnation. You can pray, fast, declare, and journal. But if you refuse to act when God says act, you'll be like the Israelites circling the same wilderness for years, calling it waiting on God when He's actually waiting on you. There comes a moment when delay becomes disobedience. This is where courage kicks in, because stepping into the new always costs something. It might cost comfort. It might cost familiarity. It might cost popularity. It might cost routines you've grown attached to. But hear me, purpose is never found in safety. Destiny is never birthed in convenience. Sometimes God will place the greatest breakthrough just outside your comfort zone to see if you're desperate enough to leave the nest. Stepping boldly doesn't mean stepping recklessly. It means stepping confidently in faith. Confidence not in your own strength, but in God's faithfulness. You don't move because circumstances look perfect. You move because God is perfect. You don't wait for everything to align. You align your faith with His instruction, and then you go. Some of you are standing on the edge of what God promised, but you're hesitating because of what you see. The waters look deep. The giants look large. The resources look limited. But let me ask you, was the Red Sea shallow when Moses stretched his staff? No, it was just as deep. Yet the miracle didn't come before movement. It came with movement. Heaven waits for bold steps. And let's confront something. Fear is often disguised as wisdom. You'll say, I'm just waiting for confirmation. But deep down, you're not waiting for confirmation. You're waiting for comfort. You're not waiting on God. You're waiting until the risk is gone. But if you're waiting for a move of God that doesn't require faith, you'll be waiting forever. You've already shifted in your mind. You've already surrendered in your heart. Now it's time to shift in your feet. Pick up the phone. Start the application. Launch the ministry. Write the book. Make the apology. Start the business. Walk into the room like God sent you there, because He did. Somebody is on the other side of your obedience waiting to be blessed by your boldness. And don't be surprised when opposition rises the moment you step forward. Movement always stirs resistance. The moment you step toward destiny, the enemy will whisper doubts. Who do you think you are? You're not qualified. What if you fail? But let me help you. Failure is not falling. Failure is refusing to move. God can redirect a moving vessel, but He cannot steer a parked car. Better to move and learn than freeze and miss your moment. If God called you, He already factored in your weakness. If He opened the door, He already prepared the room. If He shifted you, He already secured your future. Your job is not to predict outcomes. Your job is to walk in obedience. And here's the blessing. When you step with God, you never walk alone. Favor walks with you. Grace walks with you. Provision meets you on the journey. God doesn't give you wings while you're on the ground. He gives them when you jump. You might not see the whole staircase, but can you take the first step? You might not know how the bill will be paid, but can you obey anyway? You might not know how the relationship will be restored, but can you make the call? You might not know how the vision will be funded, but can you start building? Heaven doesn't reward hesitation, it rewards faith. And let me tell you, bold movement doesn't always look loud. Sometimes stepping boldly looks like quietly refusing to go back to what God already freed you from. Sometimes it's choosing discipline when you used to choose distraction. Sometimes it's showing up even when you don't feel ready. But whether it's loud or quiet, obedience in motion still shakes hell. There is a reason God didn't build your future behind you. It's in front of you. And every step you take into obedience, you prove to God that you trust Him more than your fear, more than your logic, more than your history, more than your insecurity. You show Him that you'd rather walk on unstable water with Him than stand on steady ground without Him. So at some point you've got to stop rehearsing the instructions and start responding to them. Stop circling the promise. Enter it. Stop admiring the calling. Answer it. Your destiny won't activate until your feet move. Because God's shift isn't just something to witness, it's something to walk in. Stepping into the new is one thing, staying there is another. It's possible to cross into promise and still drift back into patterns. It's possible to receive breakthrough and still lose it through neglect. That's why God is not just interested in shifting you, He's interested in sustaining you. Because a shift without stability becomes a cycle. And God didn't bring you into something new just for you to visit it. He wants you to occupy it. Once you step into what God has called you to, you can't go silent. You've got to guard what He gave. You've got to protect the ground He moved you onto. The enemy doesn't just attack before the breakthrough, he attacks after it. He's not just threatened by your movement. He's threatened by your momentum. He's not scared of someone who steps into promise once. He's terrified of someone who lives in promise consistently. It's easy to praise when the door opens. It's easy to testify when the miracle hits. But can you stay faithful when routine tries to settle in? Can you keep burning when the fire no longer feels new? This is where many lose their shift, not in crisis but in comfort. Once the thrill wears off, they drift back to old rhythms. They stop praying with urgency, stop seeking with hunger, stop expecting with boldness. But hear me, what you birthed in spiritual intensity cannot be maintained in spiritual laziness. If God shifted you, then your lifestyle has to shift too. Your habits must match your new territory. Your language must match your new level. Your discipline must rise to meet your destiny. Because the version of you that got you here is not enough to keep you here. You cannot hold on to a promised land mentality while carrying wilderness behavior. You can't treat blessings casually and expect them to grow. When God promotes you, He expects stewardship. Stewardship is not control, it's commitment. It's saying, God, I won't let what you gave grow dusty under my watch. I will nurture it, develop it, guard it. Staying in the shift requires consistency. Consistency is not glamorous. It doesn't shout. It doesn't trend. It doesn't always feel electric. But consistency builds strength. Consistency proves maturity. Consistency tells heaven, I don't just want a miracle, I want mastery. Some of you don't need another confirmation. You need consistency. You've already been shifted. Now build, plant, commit. Show up even when you don't feel the goosebumps. Worship when the atmosphere is dry. Declare truth when emotions waver. Faithfulness after fulfillment is what separates visitors from residents. And let's talk about gratitude. Gratitude anchors you when emotions fluctuate. When you intentionally thank God for where you are now, it protects you from longing for where you used to be. Israel got delivered out of Egypt, but Egypt still lived in their memory. They stepped into freedom, but kept fantasizing about bondage. Why? Because they didn't practice gratitude. They practiced comparison. Comparison kills contentment. Gratitude guards it. If you want to remain in promise, keep your heart thankful. Thankfulness keeps you from turning your testimony into complaint. But sustaining the shift also means guarding your mind. Because the enemy knows he might not get you to quit openly, but if he can get you discouraged silently, he can drain you slowly. Wariness is one of his sneakier weapons. He'll whisper, nothing's really changing. You stepped out, but nothing looks different. You obeyed, but results aren't instant. But results don't validate obedience. God does. Just because fruit isn't visible yet doesn't mean roots aren't forming. Don't abandon what God planted in you just because you don't see harvest yet. Growth is often silent before it's seen. There will be days when your feelings don't match your faith. That's not failure. That's endurance training. Endurance is not built in moments of hype. It's built in moments of pressure. When you keep going not because you feel like it, but because you're anchored in it. Breakthrough got you in. Endurance keeps you in. And don't underestimate the power of community. You weren't meant to sustain a shift alone. God will send voices to remind you who you are when you forget. Voices that won't let you slip back into what you escaped. Voices that say, hey, you didn't come this far just to shrink. But you've got to choose those voices wisely. Some people only knew you in survival mode. They're not equipped to encourage you in success mode. Surround yourself with people who don't just celebrate your arrival. They protect your assignment. And above all, stay close to the one who shifted you. Don't walk away from the altar once the answer comes. Don't drift from the presence once the blessing lands. Keep your ear near His voice. Keep your heart tender to His correction. Keep your hands lifted in surrender. What you birthed in prayer must be maintained in prayer. You asked for God's shift. Now live like you're shifted. Because this isn't just a moment, it's a mantle. When God shifts you, it's never just about you. He may start with you, but He never stops with you. Heaven is too strategic, too intentional, too purposeful to waste a move of God on a single person. When God shifts one, He plans to use that one as a catalyst for many. You are not just the result of the shift. You are now a vessel of the shift. You become a carrier of transition, a walking testimony, a living doorway for others to walk through. That means your breakthrough is not just your blessing, it's someone else's blueprint. Your testimony isn't just for storytelling, it's for unlocking. Somebody is watching you. Somebody is measuring their courage based on your boldness. Somebody is holding their breath waiting to see if you'll confirm what their spirit has been whispering. If God can shift them, maybe He can shift me too. Sometimes we get so focused on what God is doing in us that we forget He's trying to do something through us. He didn't bring you out of that pit just so you could celebrate at the top. He brought you out so you could throw a rope back down. He didn't break that addiction just so you could live free. He broke it so you could break the cycle in your bloodline. He didn't heal your body just so you could shout. He healed you so you could lay hands on the next one with authority. God is not looking for people who just experience the shift. He's looking for people who carry the shift. People who walk into rooms and atmospheres bend. People who open their mouth and chains snap off others. People who don't just survive storms, they become storms against darkness. See, once you've been shifted, you can't go back to blending in. You can't go back to being silent. You can't go back to being casual. You have too much evidence to act like nothing happened. Your life becomes a signpost. Your steps become prophetic. Your presence becomes warfare. You walk into a room and without saying a word, principalities start trembling because they recognize someone who didn't just pass through a shift, someone who became a shift, someone who knows what it's like to be stripped, refined, realigned, activated, and sustained. Someone who carries the sound of obedience in their spirit and the scent of fire on their clothes. Someone who walks in such conviction that even demons remember your testimony. Jesus I know, Paul I know, and now I know you. This is why you can't hide what God has done. This is why you can't play small just to make others comfortable. False humility is just fear wearing a church outfit. When God shifts you, you don't apologize for it. You steward it. You don't shrink to fit old spaces. You expand to fill new ones. Because now you're on assignment. Your voice is on assignment. Your story is on assignment. Your very existence becomes a weapon of hope. To become a vessel of shift means you stop speaking from theory and start speaking from encounter. You stop talking like a researcher and start talking like a witness. You don't speak of God like someone you've heard about. You speak of Him like someone you've walked with. Your prayers carry weight because they're not rehearsed. They're born from experience. Your worship hits different because it's not performance, it's memory. You remember what He brought you out of. You remember who you used to be. You remember that moment in the valley when no one else saw you but He did. And now, every hallelujah leaks gratitude. Being a vessel of shift means you take responsibility for atmosphere. You don't wait for someone else to stir the room. You stir it. You don't wait for someone else to ignite faith. You ignite it. You don't walk past a person struggling in silence. You become interruption. You don't say, "That's not my business." No, you say, "The shift in me demands I pull out the shift in you." Because here's the thing, God didn't deliver you to be distant. He delivered you to be dangerous. Dangerous to hell. Dangerous to apathy, dangerous to bondage, and dangerous to silence. You are anointed to agitate the comfort of those still trapped in what you used to die in. You are anointed to provoke holy discomfort. You are anointed to lay hands not just physically, but verbally. When you speak, chains rattle. When you testify, spirits break. When you walk, ground trembles. This is why you can't afford to get prideful. The shift wasn't just for your promotion. It was for His purpose. If you make it about you, you'll lose the oil. The oil flows through humility. You must remain yielded. Because the moment you start thinking you caused the shift, you'll stop being a vessel and start becoming a blockage. God doesn't use people who want to be worshipped. He uses people who are willing to pour. So pour. Pour what you know. Pour what you survived. Pour what you learned in the wilderness. Pour what he whispered in the midnight. Pour what he taught you through tears. Pour until others realize, wet, that same God can do it for me. Pour until entire rooms shift when you walk in. Pour until demons start dreading your morning alarm clock. This is bigger than you. You weren't shifted to sit. You were shifted to shake, because now you are the shift